Kimberly, and hi everyone. I'm super excited to be joined by such a distinguished panel who have dedicated so much time and so much of their career to driving sustainable development forward. So I'll be taking this opportunity to ask our speakers some questions that I hope will specifically be useful for you guys, Climate Hack participants, but for anyone in the audience. I understand that you guys have been very active in asking questions throughout all the talks, which is fantastic. Please keep this momentum going. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, and we'll do our very best to bring it up during the fireside chat. So hi speakers, nice to see everyone here today. So I'm just going to start off this fireside chat with a brief recap question for you guys to give a one sentence recap about what you guys do. So what do you do within one sentence? Maybe we can start with the final speaker. Yangan, do you want to start first?
Yep, sure. Thanks, Ishad. So hi everyone, I'm Yangan and I'm a friendship builder with Audacity, which by the way stands for an alternative universal design of a city. So in short, we function as a playground for innovators and we support early stage startups that are developing solutions for more sustainable and humanity-centric futures.
Sure, thanks, Yangan. Tamara, you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. So I try and so I basically have a portfolio career. I do some work with a venture builder. I also work to try and bring together asset owners, finance players with digital transformation and sustainability, bringing all three of those things together. And that's where I spend my time these days.
Thanks, Tamara. Akib, you want to go next?
Hi, thank you. My name is Akib, and I'm a sustainable consultant working with the public, people, and private sectors throughout on sustainability issues all around the world.
Thanks, Akib. Suhan, you want to go next?
Hi, yes, my name is Han. I'm an architect and a sustainable development professional, and my work is in making buildings green and making lives better.
Sure, thanks, Suhan. And last but certainly not least, Abby, would you like to have a go?
Hi, my name is Abby. I'm a landscape architect by training, and I'm still in the professional landscape architecture and advising on technologies for sustainable built environment.
Okay, thanks everyone. So how this is going to work is that I'm just going to open the floor. If you want to give a response, maybe signal a little bit like, hey, I want to go, just so that we don't talk over each other. Okay, so I'll start off with the first question that's asked by Sally from Singapore, which incidentally is the first question that I prepared as well. So is there one specific climate or environmental challenge that you want to draw more attention to beyond the context of the talks that you've given just now? And why do you think it's either important or a good opportunity for youth to actually address this challenge? Just wanted to open the floor.
I think I can go first. Yes. So I think a similar question by Sally, I think it was on nuclear as well, right? So I'm quite passionate about nuclear energy as well. Of course, we have had bad repute because of Fukushima disasters and Chernobyl disasters and all. But I think that the nuclear energy sector is something that has developed so much forward now. And I think it's more of a commitment issue as well. And in terms of understanding educational issue about nuclear, and as of now in the global world, we see about 10% of energy being produced is through nuclear in a global sector. For Singapore, now they are also, of course, thinking about nuclear energy sector, and they're not, of course, big reactors cannot come into play over here because of the region size, but there are mini micro nuclear reactors that can work upon. There's a lot of R&D happening, and I think that is something that we can explore and expand. And of course, one more thing about is, of course, besides another factoid about this is that besides hydropower, it is one of the second largest source of low carbon electricity producer in the world actually as well. So I think it has great potential, and I would love to see it happen more as well as we go forward.
Sure, thanks, Akib. Anyone else wants to chime in?
Yeah. No, go ahead.
So maybe we'll go with Tamara first, and then after that we'll go with Abby.
Sure. So one thing I've experienced over the years is there's a lot of people with great ideas and great interest and who want to do things to further sustainability across the planet. And one of the challenges that a lot of people I meet seem to face is they don't know how. And so this idea of how each and every individual can take a step and do great things is something that I think is worth considering. We've seen some interesting models, right? So Alipay have this thing called Ant Forest, where for every time a user opts to not take a car and then go for a walk instead, or a credit gets given, and eventually it becomes a seed that goes into planting trees. And they've through that created 450,000 employment opportunities for farmers across China. And they've done the same thing in the Philippines. Gcash did something with G-Forest. So this idea of bringing access to the people, well, I like it because it helps people to amplify their message and their agency, which Suhan spoke to earlier. Every one of us in this room has the ability to reflect what we believe in. And I think the ability to amplify that voice is going to be something very important in the future. Over to Abby.
Sure. Abby?
I wanted to add on to the energy part of things. I personally believe there's a huge potential in hydrogen as a driver for renewable energy, as an alternative, a very, very viable alternative to nuclear. And that's because it really facilitates the export of renewables. You could harvest solar, wind, and be able to convert it into hydrogen and to export it in a mass scale. And so I really believe in hydrogen from the energy part of things. So if I have to highlight a climate challenge, I would think sea level rise. And that takes a lot of planning and early effort and has dramatic impact on cities. And something on a shorter time scale, waste. Waste is probably one of the most challenging issues, especially for island states. Yeah.
Thanks, Abby. So I'll go over to Yangan because I think he had something that he wanted to add just now. Yangan, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, so I think they spoke about energy. I just wanted to highlight about agri-food as well, since I look quite closely into the space. So I think many people have heard about food waste, alternative proteins, plant-based meats. I think these topics have dominated the news definitely over the past few years. But I think an up-and-coming area that's worth looking into would be regenerative agriculture, which is basically how you marry modern technology together with age-old philosophies like permaculture, right? It's really to help us farm better and also more sustainably. And if you go back to the fundamentals of farming, great soils, we know is paramount to feeding a growing demand for food, right? And unfortunately, fertilizer is really not sustainable because a lot of it doesn't get absorbed by the plants or by the crops. A lot of it gets washed down into the waters. And at the same time, the process of applying fertilizer, emits a lot of greenhouse gases as well. So I think an interesting area to look out for would be using natural alternatives to fertilizers, or even using microbes-based solutions in order to kind of bring nitrogen directly into the soil. Yeah.
Right, interesting. So, Suhan, before we move on to the next question, do you want to chime in any suggestions?
No, I mean, the benefit of going last is that you can basically say, I agree with all the above. And I think very often the waste equation is not tied back to the energy equation, except it is, because the more waste you generate, the more energy is required to remove it. The more waste you generate, the more products are being generated for consumerism. And therefore, the more energy and carbon is involved in actually creating these products in the first place. So very often we hear of waste and energy as separate problems, but they are definitely interrelated. And my response would therefore be primarily waste and energy.
Thanks, Suhan. And I think it's really interesting how, on the one hand, like we've heard answers that talked about new approaches to energy. So, for example, nuclear and hydrogen. I mean, they're not new, but these are things that we are in a position to actively think about and how to integrate it into society right now. And then on the other hand, it's not just about like hardcore R&D, it's also about trying to find interesting models as well as finding ways to better give people access to the different messages associated with sustainability. I'm going to steer the conversation a little bit more towards the R&D side first, because we have a question from Jody, also from Singapore, and they ask, what are the resources and facilities for emerging entrepreneurs or emerging people that are looking to solve the problem? What do they need to do, or how can they get help with regards to their R&D activities? Just wanted to open to the floor as well.
again, I think I can get the conversation started over here as well, right? So,
Exactly.
so again, yes, especially from a Singapore point of view, and not just Singapore, I think like with Hong Kong and Taiwan coming into the play, and Indonesia as well, there's lots and lots of help provided through government partners as well, towards just the ideation part of it, and then they can take the idea from onwards over there. There's a lot of venture builders out there who can help you develop the ideas and take it to the markets as well. I think I just wanted to explain that there are a lot of resources available, and we as a sustainable consultant can also help out accordingly as well in terms of connecting the dots over here.
Sure, thanks, Akib. I don't mean to like maybe single out any one of you, but Yangan, since you specifically have talked about working within the space of incubation, like just wanted to hear your thoughts about how early stage projects and startups can get access to some resources.
Yeah, I think in general, I would say even the government has put in a lot of resources and efforts to kind of encourage early stage startups. In fact, like last time, there used to be a gap in terms of early stage funding, but I think now there isn't. A lot of early stage accelerators, incubators, even venture builders like Antler, EF are also encouraging a lot more deep tech solutions. Of course, I think the government has prioritized quite a number of areas, but I think all these areas are all very, very relevant to whatever that we have covered today. So I think one good way, I mean, if you're an individual or you have a small group of people that's really interested in solving a particular kind of crisis, I think there's no harm reaching out to those incubators that are doing deep tech solutions. So Audacity is one of them as well. So feel free to talk to me. I'd be happy to link you up with other partners that we work with as well. But I think that would be a good place to start. We accept anyone from as early as ideation all the way to pre-seed to seed stage, right? So that's where we really will work with companies to refine those ideas, think about a market and an industry that's ready to adopt the solution, and then help them to raise some initial funding. The road is not going to be easy because I think deep tech and climate tech, these are massive challenges. And a lot of attention has always been focused on software companies, right? Software internet businesses, which really characterize Southeast Asia's startup growth at the start. But I think right now we're seeing the next wave, which is really to focus on climate. And I think Southeast Asia is in a good position to capture that, because a lot of the effects of climate change will be on these developing nations. So I think there's a lot of room. The market is definitely big enough for such solutions to take place. Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys. So I'm going to move on to the next question, unless anyone has any burning thoughts that you want to share about this. Okay, so I'm going to move on because they have given me a hard cut. So this next question actually is directed more specifically to Abby and Suhan. It's by Jerry. I'm not sure where Jerry is from. But how would you incorporate the idea of connecting buildings to already existing buildings, as well as how can we make sure that private sector people will follow the guidelines? I suppose this sort of has a how do I put this? Maybe the context behind this question is a little bit more on the smart city side, as well as like connected buildings and all that. Just wanted to get your point of view. Oh, Jerry's from Indonesia. I just got that information. Yeah. So how do you incorporate the idea of connected buildings, and how do you ensure that private sector players play nice when it comes to this connectivity, and why is it important that happens?
Suhan, okay. Go first.
All right. Thank you, Jerry. Terima kasih. Apa kabar? I think it's good. It's a good question because it's something that we face a lot in terms of connections to neighboring developments. For instance, very often the way land and real estate is tendered out is in terms of specific land lots, and then you therefore either lease or purchase specific, or you bid or you tender for specific land lots. And that means you're subject to your own setbacks, you're subject to your own boundaries within a building, and the way you're assessed, therefore, by the authorities is also within these boundaries. So what can actually be encouraged is basically a master plan level type of planning where you're required to make certain types of connections, whether it's a physical connection that allows landscape to therefore grow, flourish, and proliferate, or whether it's an energy type of exchange as well, where if you happen to have a building with sufficient renewable energy sources, you can actually tap some more, and if you don't use it, you can actually share it as well. Now, if you can figure out already, there's a lot of it is actually policy-based, right? So a lot of it is actually man-made policies and the types of leeways that developers, that governments and municipalities actually are able to allow, right? So I think whatever is man-made can also be solved. And therefore, I think thorough review of policies tends to be necessary. And this already is happening in Singapore through the long-term review plan that the URA conducts, also in concurrence with some of the goals of sustainable living under the Green Plan 2030. So part of the discussions between the URA and the Institute of Architects as well is in how we can combine green and blue spaces a little bit more, and also make use of the airspace, because even if your land is separated by roads, by boundaries, by fences at the ground level for various reasons, you could, in theory, connect at the sky level as well, right? And then it's down to the facilities management and the user to ensure that even shared facilities are well maintained and shared facilities are well upkept, because very often when something's in no man's land and it's no jurisdiction by anyone, that tends to be ignored, and it becomes dilapidated over a period of time.
Thanks, Johan. Abby, do you have anything else you want to chime in? I think they specifically pointed you out for some insights.
Well, I found it interesting how that question came about, since we're in a climate discussion. So I suspect that might be also at the back of the mind how landscape would be integrated into buildings. I think so.
Perhaps.
And I think a lot of it, if we wish things to be private sector driven, it has to come with marketing of the idea and helping developers understand the outcome that it can achieve, and also the sellability of some of these outcomes from an economic perspective. I mean, developers are developers. So yeah, that would be my short answer.
Thanks, Abby. So I'm going to move on to the next few questions. So this one is from Glendon, who comes from Singapore. And he asks, how can we help to encourage a greater focus on an efficient and resilient future? The subtext behind this is that he feels that it's evident that many countries don't currently prioritize it. Tamara, I saw your hand go up. How about you go first?
Yeah, so this is something I've done a fair bit of work on over the last few years. I've been advising the IFC part of the World Bank, and I've been just consulting for the G7 as part of the, I think, the 7 process. And one of the things that's happened historically is the world has sort of operated initially with carrots, and we're starting to move now towards sticks. So in the past, we sort of said, hey guys, this is the right thing to do. You guys should think about it. The technologies to support transitions were quite expensive to adopt. And so unless people believed, it was not intuitive, particularly if you're based on the idea of shareholder return, to then go and invest in something that potentially wasn't going to pay you a return on investment. So this is why quite often I'll say I think our financial system has not served us over time, and needs to be that we need paradigm shifts in finance. What's happened since then, of course, is post-COVID, as we've seen more and more things kind of play out over time, the science has developed and improved. We've moved away from the do the right thing message to the now we have like the European regulations on carbon, we have taxonomies and standards, and we're going to start seeing carbon taxes, right? So in Singapore, they've already announced carbon taxes. And so companies will have to start taking action if they want to be feasible for growth over time. In the US, Biden has just issued his executive order where he's asking companies to look at their level 3 emissions, which is going to start pushing the idea of thinking about carbon into the suppliers to these businesses. So that change is happening now. The sticks are actually starting to get wielded. The carrots are also coming into play, because as you get into a world where the carbon price gets more expensive and the carbon tax becomes more burdensome, people will want to invest for tax management reasons, if not the right thing. And so that's where I think that there's that balance between public, private, carrot and stick that's coming to play now.
Thanks, Tamara. Maybe since we have a couple more questions, right? I'm going to move on to the next ones, and anyone who wants to answer, please go ahead. And if you want to answer this one as well, it's fine too. So I wanted to know from the floor, are there any common pitfalls that you've seen when people work on climate-related challenges? So just now we kind of talked about the big picture, how do we encourage greater focus? But on the flip side, like when it comes to individual operators, how do we steer them away, or like what are certain things that you have seen where people have fallen into specific pitfalls when they try to address these climate-related issues? Open to the floor. Anyone wants to go?
I guess I can.
Yeah, Tamara, please.
So there are two things I see. So I coach on Facebook Meta's accelerator on social enterprises and nonprofits. And one of the things that often happens is in the quest to survive and to fundraise and get the money they need to actually continue what they're trying to do, a lot of companies lose focus. They start to compromise and start to do things that are not necessarily about their purpose, but about keeping their investors. And that is a risk, I would say, happens generally across all industries when it's in the startup space. The second thing I would mention is the problem is actually very big and very hard. And one of the things that happens with climate is the work you do here might be benefiting somebody outside of your direct investor or customer pool. And so the idea of the shared benefits and people paying for that shared benefit becomes a challenge for many people. I can see Suhan's got his hand up too.
Sure. I think before we go over to Suhan, I think Abby raised her hand before that. So Abby, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I feel one of the greatest risks is falling into greenwashing. So there's far too often good intentions that drives the development of the solution tend to become watered down, either, for all sorts of reasons, and they become a very superficial solution that really is just green on the surface and isn't anything more. So that's one of the things that needs to be thought about.
Thanks, Abby. And Suhan, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, I think the common pitfall on people who work on climate change or climate challenges is a common pitfall for people who want to endeavor in many things, and that is a fear of failure. And that fear of failure is generated by the fact that whatever you're pursuing may not actually have a direct outcome, first of all, on profit, may not actually have a direct outcome also on impact. And I therefore encourage anyone who's involved in any work on climate change to have a different measure of impact, and that measure of impact will not necessarily just be profit. It could lead to offshoot solutions that you haven't even thought about in terms of application, as what Tamara has alluded to. And yes, please also be aware of, or please guard yourself against greenwashing.
All right. So before we close today's session, I didn't want to end the session on a negative note. I wanted to end on a note of hope, I suppose. So even though we've talked about the pitfalls, I was wondering if we could go one round, if everyone could share one line about any advice that you have about young people taking part in Climate Hack, given the context that they might be doing this as an experiment. Just wanted to know what your thoughts are about young people and if you have any advice for them. Let's go from Yangan again, just to wrap up today's session. Yangan, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I would say the thing I wanted to say is really don't be constrained by the ideas that you're able to come up with. I think a lot of times you worry about whether something's feasible today, worry about whether people like your product. But I think when you're brainstorming, you need to go rogue, right? So make the funnel as big as possible so that you can come up with as many ideas. And then from there, using your customer validation approaches, surveys, feedbacks, then you narrow down that funnel into something that could potentially work. So my advice would be just think far, think big. I think the climate opportunity is really huge for us to capture. And whatever that we are seeing is really just the tip of the iceberg.
Thanks, Yangan. Iceberg is really appropriate in this particular conversation. Tamara, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm going to quote Vanilla Ice, that great proponent of sustainability, and suggest that, people, I think what I would encourage is the idea of collaborating and listen. So, a lot of the time, the great solutions don't get delivered in isolation. So do build your collaboration networks and do listen to what other people are finding, because it might influence how you might want to iterate your product or develop your product over time.
Thanks, Tamara. Okay, any final comments?
Yeah, I think, agree with both of them as well. But I think for me, it's majorly about actions. So I think we need to get out of our heads and put things in action. Even if it's the wrong step, at least you learn, and we learn from failures the most, right? So I think that's where I would want to be. Get into action. Let's do things.
Thanks, Akit. Suhan, what about you?
Yep, I've got two very quick things. The first is do not undermine your own youth and relative inexperience. That can be turned into your advantage, because youth tends to be where creativity originates, right? Because you're not, basically muddied by the ways of the world. But also at the same time, do not rule yourself out from the advice of those who are more experienced.
Thanks, Suhan. And finally, Abby, you want to close off today's session?
Yeah. So people are the problem and people are the solution. And we will find that many times climate issues are essentially at its heart a people issue, a human issue. Yeah. So we are also the solution.
Thanks so much, Abby, and thanks so much to all the speakers today for giving all of your insights. I'm very sure that our audience has learned so much from you guys, and personally, I've learned so much as well. So thank you guys. And that's all for the Fireside Chat. So back to you, Kimberly.